Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, natter along, trying to accentuate the positive and also to guess what my special guest's favourite things about this episode are.
Hello, my name's Stephen Hatcher. I'm the coordinator of the Hoover's Doctor Who group based in Derby. And for the last 11 years, I've been the organiser of the Hooverville convention that we organise once a year in normal times. And for the last couple of years, we've also been organising Big Finish Day in conjunction with our friends at Big Finish. Over the years, I've done a bit of writing as well. I wrote 5 stories for Big Finish Short Trips books. Recently, I've contributed a couple of pieces for Doctor Who magazine. And over the years, I've written any number of pieces for charity anthologies and essay collections on Doctor Who and loads of other TV-related topics, including Star Cops, Catweasel, The Tomorrow People, Star Trek, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Douglas Adams, David Bowie, all sorts of stuff. And I'm also the fiction editor of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society magazine Cosmic Mask. Well, thanks so much to Toby for inviting me to suggest a story for him to talk about. Toby, what I've got for you is the Sea Devils. Now, the Sea Devils is something very special for me because this was the story that really turned me on to being a Doctor Who fan. I'm old enough to have watched Doctor Who right from the beginning. I was born in 1958, but for various family reasons, throughout the 60s, I saw very little Doctor Who. The first story I actually remember seeing anything of at all is The Web Planet, and I've got vague memories of the massacre, but nothing very much at all during the 60s, although of course I was very aware of it, the same as every child growing up at that time was. And then on December the 27th, 1972, I caught the omnibus edition of The Sea Devils. And it absolutely hooked me. I loved the fact that it was set on Earth. Very much about that story was the sea setting of it. I loved the fact that it was set, at sea, basically. The sea's always been something that's meant a lot to me. I was brought up in Warwickshire, about as far away from the sea as you can get in England, on a small island. But to say I had a naval background is putting it a bit strongly, but my dad was before I was born. He was a member of the. He was in the Navy. He was a regular Navy person, serving on aircraft carriers and the rest of it. And my brother and I, as we were growing up, we always enjoyed my dad's stories about his time in the Navy, around about the time of the Korean War and that sort of business. So the Navy's always meant a lot for me. We loved our holidays to the seaside. Not every summer, but when we did go, we went to the seaside. And my dad seemed to very much light up when he was inside of the sea. He almost sort of turned into some sort of piratical figure as we reached the sea. I think it's probably a bit silly, but there we go. My dad died earlier this year, so memories of him are very strong at the moment. So the sea and the earthbound setting and all the rest of it absolutely got me hooked. I loved Pertwee as the Doctor, and I loved Joe and everything about this fabulous story. Now people have told me that the Sea Devils is nowhere near as good a story as the Silurians, the story that it got so much of its inspiration from. In many ways, it was a sequel to. I hear what they're saying, but they're wrong. Yes, it's true that the portrayal of the Earth reptiles, the Sea Devils, Silurians, call them what you want, is much more nuanced and I suppose interesting in the earlier story, the Silurians. And the Sea Devils were, I suppose, pretty much not hugely interesting in terms of what they were doing. They were blowing ships up. They were doing what the master told them. But there we've hit the nub as to why this this story is for me so much better than the earlier story. The Master, you've got the mighty Delgado in there at his very, very best. Now, the bizarre thing is, when I came to see this story again, many, many, many years later, I had very strong memories of the Sea Devils. I saw it in the repeat season of, what would that be, 1992? As I remember it, Sunday lunchtime repeats of Doctor Who stories. And there was the Sea Devils. And the one aspect of the story that I'd completely forgotten was the fact that the Master was in it, which is bizarre because he totally dominates the story, and I'd forgotten he was in it. There we are. Right, okay, well, if I can get on to my things that I want to say I particularly remember, particularly love for each episode.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to this episode of Happy Times and Places. I'm happily ensconced on a Sunday bank holiday, and I'm going to watch some Sea Devils. Now, I'm not sure it's always right to date these because they come out quite a lot later if you're not a patron. Because actually the date should be immaterial because I'm watching old Doctor Who. But the reason I'm in a Sea Devil kind of mood is because 2 weeks ago today, the Sea Devils returned in present-day Doctor Who, looking very much like they do in this one, although dressed more piratically rather than in string vests. And I like both costumes, so there's no... I'm not comparing costumes at all. I think both look great. So I'd actually intended to do this particular adventure in the run-up to that, just for my own, because I was feeling Sea Devil-y, and I thought, well, I'm going to watch. I want to watch the original. But then I just watched the original. What I'm about to commentate over, I just watched for pleasure, which is because I have to remind myself sometimes I like Doctor Who, and sometimes it's all right just to watch Doctor Who. So I'd geared it up all ready to do the commentary, and I thought I'd actually just quite like to watch it. So watch it I did. So I'm perhaps slightly more clued up than so I was with the Dominators, which was the last story I did, which I hadn't seen for donkey's years. But either way, I say that for full disclosure. Welcome, thank you so much for listening. I'm, preparing myself. That was a lovely introduction for Steve. I'm sorry to hear about his dad. I did know about that because we're Facebook friends. Steve is a lovely fella, organises terrific events, and I'm so delighted he's chosen this story. And it is apposite that we do it at this time where everyone is currently in sort of Who fandom, discussing the merits or otherwise of the legend of the Sea Devils. And of course, actually, everyone's gearing up to the possible announcement of the new Doctor Who, which non-patrons, when you hear this, will be old news. Well, Hugh Grant will have been to Gallifrey by the time you listen to this. But we are in the dark, so we're going to go underwater to encounter the marine cousins of the Silurians. A great story that, as Steve suggested. I'm looking forward to doing Doctor Who and the Silurians, but we have its cousin, the Sea Devils, and we're going to press play in 3, 2, 1.
Playing from Sausage Magoo.
Sorry, that's the name of my. That's Alexa telling me that's the name of our speaker, Sausage Magoo. I don't know why it's taking ages to load. So this is exciting. There we go. Right. Alexa, volume 4. Alexa, volume 3. Okay, so I don't want to wake the neighbours with Delia Derbyshire's best unearthly caterwauls. Well, I mean, I leave all that stuff in. Why not? I know a lot of podcasts that leave in ums and little segues that go nowhere. I love this opening, and I'm constrained by time. I have to fit this into the episode itself. I think this is a wonderfully economical opening. I was disappointed when I first saw it, when I first saw this as a grotty bootleg video. We'll discuss that later. Because the opening chapter of the book, The Sea Devils, has this great thing on the SS Pevensey Castle where there's a lieutenant called Mitchell, is he, and Sparks, the radio guy, and a guy called Scouse, who's presumed, and they have this whole thing, and I think the Sea Devil killed Mitchell first, and yet Mitchell is introduced as your focal character. I think it's Mitchell, though I think David Griffin's character is Mitchell later. Maybe they use the name for the different characters. But anyway, it's a whole big epic, monsters burn. Oh, and it's terrifying because the sailors try to escape, but the Sea Devil burns the boats from underneath, which we get an element of later on, but you actually see it happening in that opening chapter. And it's really grim. These are monsters that attack you at sea, but they won't even let you off the boat that you're on, and they destroy the boat that you're on. There's no escape. It's an amazing opening. So, of course, but the money couldn't buy, certainly not Doctor Who in 1972 money couldn't buy. Strictly speaking, it was made in 1971. But I think just having one actor, Neil Saylor, who turns up later in Death to the Daleks. Michael Bryant knew him quite well, I think. Just doing that, we're under attack, and he does that quite, professionally. And then just the hand and the blur out of focus as he puts his hand to its face. It's terrific. What an opening when you can't do what the book can do, and you've just got an actor and a green glove and some imagination as to what to do with your camera. I think that's as good a cold opening of Doctor Who as you could possibly have. I do wonder why all the guards have moustaches. I don't know. A level in prisoner etiquette, B-Tech in sharpshooting, and City and Guilds in moustaches. I love this as well. I love the whole thing about Trenchard, but he's quite rude to them there. But then he's not rude when he speaks to them. He's not a rude character, but he does rude things because that's what people in authority do. It would have been sort of less surprising if he'd then been really brusque and unpleasant with them. But it's not. It's just the thing that he does is he makes people wait. There's a brilliant bit later with the Gulf when he says in conference. Clive Morton, who I think you'll find, I'm going to point you to a mistake in a previous Seeds of Death. Last time I'd looked, I'm sure in a theatre book or something, or a character actor's book, I'd read that Hugh Morton from the Seeds of Death was Clive Morton from the Sea Devils, his brother. And it wasn't a Doctor Who book, it was something else. And I mentioned that fact in the Seeds of Death commentary. It's not true. I don't think it's true. I've done a little bit. I just suddenly had because when you learn something and you think it's true, you don't bother to check. Years later, go, I wonder if that was a mistake. But I do sometimes. So I did, and they do look quite similar, but they've got a similar sort of domed forehead. But no, they're not. They weren't brothers. So I'm sorry about that. I would go and re-edit the past, but let somebody glory in my erroneousness. So my history with the Sea Devils is an interesting one. I loved the Chris Achilleos book cover, and it was one of those that sort of leered at me from I think the back of the making of the Doctor Who monster book that I had. But we did not have the Sea Devils book. But my brothers had talked of it, so maybe they did at some point and had lent it to somewhere. So I actually bought it from the Castle Bookshop in Ludlow, but was disappointed because it's the John Geary cover, which have very much their own style and are very good. But it's not the Chris Achilleos one, which I just think is glorious. And there's something slightly musty about the Geary one was sort of shinier. Just somehow shinier, I think, the material that the book was made of. But just the whole vibe. Whereas the Chris Achilleos one is sort of, I associate it with those dusty, I can feel it now, the dustiness of those books and the smell of them. Slightly older, slightly more sort of papery and cardboardy. And that's a very good scene because it's basically establishing, the master is locked up safe, don't worry about it, there's nothing going on here, he's definitely a prisoner. And that's a great way for Trenchard to convince, the Doctor and Joe that it's all as it should be. So I got the Sea Devils book, really excited, and then found it quite hard going. I found all the Malcolm Hulke books quite hard going. They were just not quite as accessible to me as the Terence Dicks ones. But bear in mind, I started reading these when I was too young to be reading them, really. I think we all did, didn't we? And I don't think I quite took everything in. It's how I learnt to read. But, Dicks was my gateway drug into literature. And, when they were no longer satisfying me, that's when I I'm trying to think of a phrase, but do you jack up drugs? That's when I jacked up the Hulk. But I remember even then when I read this, I remember missing. I think I read the opening, which is great with Mitchell on the boat, but then the bit with the Doctor and Joe going towards the Master's prison wasn't really for me. I wanted to get into the action, so I skipped that bit. Although I do remember there's a bit where he explains Mayday and what Mayday means. It's Doctor Who fulfilling its educational remit, and I did French at school, so it's like, oh, Mayday, oh, that's good, I like that. Now I don't know if I picked that up the second time I read it and went, that's why I should read these opening bits. Well, I've got a feeling that's sort of when I gave up and I went, yeah, this is fine and everything, and I'm happy that I'm learning this stuff, but I want to get to the Sea Devils. So I did miss the first couple of chapters. Of course, I went back and read it later. But much of what I think of this story is shaped by that book that I remember so well. I remember the great disappointments with the bits that weren't in it. I think I've even illustrated a podcast about the Target books using the Sea Devils as an example. I think, is it Rob Shearman that does it in the Doctor Who magazine, had a series of sort of authors' takes on fan writer takes on each particular story. Everyone wrote a little essay concentrating on one aspect of it, and I'm sure it was Rob that did the bit about Trenchard's safety catch, which we'll talk about in episode 4, where it doesn't happen. But lots of beautiful little bits. All the bits that kind of spoke to you from the book were not in the TV version. Now, of course, that's not the TV version's fault, because when this is being made, the book did not exist, and it's the same writer, and he's just he's amusing himself, or he's adapting to the new medium, which is absolutely legitimate and brilliant. And it means we've got sort of two versions of this story, but it means that this version always came a bit short for me, especially when it came in that period where I was sort of devouring bootleg Doctor Who's at quite a steady pace just to sort of get them watched, and I was borrowing them off friends. And as Steve suggested, Doctor Who and the Silurians is very highly regarded, and season 7 is a favourite of people like me. And as a result, I was always then a bit... I think the season 7 stories in execution were less disappointing because I think the production values are so strong because of the 7 episodes and all of that, and slightly more sort of gritty and adult in Doctor Who terms in intent than the Let's Hulk stuff. So which are slightly more kooky and 70s and sort of child friendly, I'd say. So I had a bit of a downer on the Pertwee era for quite a while. Just that it was none of the stories were quite as good as I'd hoped, and it was only when this was repeated in the 90s and they did a gorgeous trailer, which I think is one of the loveliest bits of Doctor Who. It really made you want to watch. It had a bit with the Master and the Clangers, and it had the bit of Neil Seeler with his hands on his face, and it had the burnt boat. It's a really, really well put together trailer that really got my Doctor Who juices going, and I watched it in excellent quality for the first time. Restored and but certainly not from bootleg. And it came much more alive to me. It was much more exciting, and I think Michael Bryant's superb camera work, where he's got these wonderful close-ups of the actors' faces, and there's some brilliant close-ups here. He loves Delgado's face. Look at that, and that's where the trailer started. Could have another television colour, of course, and it just shows the sort of hold that the Master has over Trenchard, even though, as it turns out, he's not hypnotised him or anything. It's just it's a psychological hold. It's a manipulative hold. And those close-ups really help with that. And a pair of lovely actors doing nice work. This is Royston Tickner, who'd yelled his way through episode 7 of the Daleks Master Plan. He's Steinberger P. Green, the... P. Green. I've just got that joke. Oh God, Steinberger P. Green, the director of the film in the Daleks Master Plan episode 7, so we can hear him on the soundtrack yelling. But he was a friend of Michael Bryant. Great duffel coat, by the way. You don't see duffel coats like that enough anymore. And was indeed a man of the sea, so good casting for this. I wonder if Royston hadn't been available, if Richard Beale would have done it, because Richard Beale, who's Bat Masterson in the Gunfighters, and he's in the Green Death and the Ark, he does voice work in the Ark of the Macro Terror, who's also a man of the sea. I wonder if Richard would have got the part, because Michael used him a lot too. And I love this bit, and I remember this bit being in the book, isn't it, where basically they both bribe Robbins to use. I wonder if there'd been a TARDIS crew of 4. So Doctor takes. Does the Doctor take the boat? Yeah, Joe takes the motorcycle. If it had been the Doctor and Yaz and Graham and Ryan, the Doctor takes the boat, Yaz takes the motorcycle, Graham takes his roller skates, and Ryan goes on piggyback. But it's a nice little touch. I love this about because it always surprises me in the Pertwee era how many, now I think certainly later when you wrote a 4-part Doctor Who story, a 6-part Doctor Who story, your actors for the 6 episodes, you tried to have characters that would last pretty much through. It's a better use of resources. A lot of the Pertwee story have a sort of cast of thousands. There are loads of sort of characters who pop in just for 1 or 2 episodes, and it gives it a much bigger scope, but it also means you can have fun with the different people you're populating your story with. And Robbins, he's only on film as well, so probably only a day out of Royston Tickner's life. To pop in and have a nice little bit of interaction with the regulars. So we have Edwin Richfield doing what on earth, having to do official acting. Look at the sea, isn't it beautiful? The scope we're afforded as well by, we'll see, lots of Royal Navy help being given, but the sea setting is lovely as well, especially coming, although this was made before, but hot on the heels of The Curse of Peladon, which is, entirely studio-based. And here's June Murphy, who for years nobody knew where she was, because she's really called Laura. And she wasn't getting any residuals either from Doctor Who, but she was married to Brian Cullingford, who she met on the set of Fury from the Deep, in which they were both actors. So both of her Doctor Whos are to do with the sea. Michael Bryant was a AFM, or a production assistant, on Fury from the Deep, so maybe he associated June Murphy with the sea, which she has to walk into in Fury from the Deep. So she's Maggie Harris in Fury from the Deep, which was my favourite story when I was young. So we'll go into that when we do Fury. It was the first story I knew the whole cast list of, and of course, because it was missing, its reputation was untarnishable. And of course, it sounded good to say when people said, "What's your story?" and you said something that people didn't expect. But I genuinely, I listened to it over and over again. Anyway, so that's why the Sea Devils had a nice little connection for me to the story that was my favourite. Isn't this just one of the most glorious bits? Delgado is so pitch perfect, and that little charming whistle he does, and the fact that he enjoys it. I love the fact that the Master is slightly taken by these creatures. And then Trenchard's reaction is delightful. It's this whole interaction is not necessary to the story at all. And the look on Delgado's face when he comes to turn the telly off is just glorious. And there's a man who knows exactly where the camera is. I love that. It's one of my favourite things. If that's not the favourite thing of the episode, Steve and I perhaps aren't going to get on. It's just wonderful every turn. It's got a little bit of character to it. It's very funny. It's actually rather charming. Both characters are charming. The Master's charming. This, psychopathic evildoer, rather taken with a children's television program, and genuinely so. And Trenchard's, absolutely sort of guileless acceptance that the Master might think that they're really aliens, because you shouldn't think Trenchard watches much television. He's too busy reading books about the Empire. It's just glorious. This is a wonderful opening episode because you've had the twist that, well, first of all, you've seen something get lost at sea. It was supposed to be an oil rig, wasn't it? This, and they didn't get permission to shoot on an oil rig, so they used the sea fort, which are very, very, very handy, and they're great. They're great looking things. I think you can live here now. Not here. This is the studio, but I think you can live in the sea forts now if you have billions of pounds. These are two wonderful character actors. Hugh Futcher, his only episode of Doctor Who. He's been in everything. He's in the movie of Quatermass and the Pit. He's in the Carry On films. He was in The Crown recently. He was in a Specsavers advert. Proper sort of fussy little character actor, can turn his hand to everything. And he does one episode of Doctor Who, and it's this one. But he did audition to play the Seventh Doctor. So they obviously wanted sort of a funny little character actor. If he didn't audition, he was certainly seen. I think Nathan Turner went to see him in the theatre. I don't know if they actually got him in and spoke to him. I have interviewed Hugh. I'm sure I can't. It was a while ago. And for Patreon listeners, the very next release after episode 1 of The Sea Devils will be my interview with Hugh Futcher. So if you would like to be a patron, you get some extra goodies, and also they will have listened to this 6 months earlier than you currently are. So you'll know how the whole imminent World War III thing has gone. Well, let's hope you are listening to it. That's all I can say. Edwin Richfield is great. You need a sort of brigadier. Well, you don't need him, but he's a brigadier sort of figure. But butts against the Doctor slightly more in these these earlier sections, which is nice. Richfield is also a Quatermass alumnus. He's also in the film of Quatermass and the Pit, but is also in the film of Quatermass 2, playing a different part. He lived not far away. I remember when he died. It was in the Shropshire Star. I've still got the cutting somewhere. I used to cut those things out of the papers. He was only 66. That seemed quite old then, but now you think 66, that's no age. And I think he had a wine shop in somewhere sort of Shropshire-y, near the Welsh border somewhere. And also plays, you wouldn't know from looking at him, Mestor in The Twin Dilemma, where I believe from some people on the set of that he was not a happy bunny, because I think he probably gave quite a good villainous performance in rehearsal, so then turns up to the studio and he's covered in a terrible costume that he can't move in. And Hugh Futcher is joined on the oil rig in these wonderful, both wearing those sorts of jumpers you only wear on an oil rig in TV programmes. I love them, they're really evocative. By Declan Mulholland, who had a similar ignominy to Edwin Richfield, except he didn't have to wear a horrible monster costume. His monster scene was cut, and then when it was put back into Star Wars, he was replaced by a CGI Jabba the Hutt, because he was the humanoid Jabba the Hutt. I love that shot of Hugh Futcher going up the ladder, and the clanking, the sound design in this episode is superb. The sound, the echoing, clanging sounds that you get of the metallic infrastructure of the sea fort is fabulous, and you get. I can feel the cold in the air. I can hear the echoes. I think it's sort of above and beyond the Call of Duty sound work, and that's a fantastic shot from above the ladder. And the lighting is great as well. It's a wonderful synthesis of all the things that the BBC do well if everyone's putting their mind to it. And Hickman's dead with his eyes open, which is always because it was always you'd know someone was dead in a TV thing if their eyes were closed. It was always a bit scarier if their eyes were open somehow. And of course we haven't properly seen the Sea Devils yet. In the book we see them straight away there. We've seen the hand. We just saw the side of his face then. And I always assumed that the reveal of the Sea Devil was the cliffhanger, even after I'd seen it for the first time. And I remember being surprised in the repeat when you actually get a shot of the Sea Devil a bit before the cliffhanger, and you go, "Oh God, where have we got to go now?" And the cliffhanger sort of comes out of nowhere. It's interesting. Stop saying interesting, Toby. But yeah, this is a if Horatio. Oh yes, Horatio Nelson. Although I remember watching this at university, and a friend of mine who's now a very good actor who works quite a lot, was slightly mocking of Richfield's delivery here. The what does he say? More poor fellow's mad as a hatter. But I think that's perfect. You know, it's the sort of thing you wouldn't get to do now because people don't sort of talk to themselves so much. You know, in the coda to a scene, it's a sort of piece of televisual grammar that we don't do anymore, and you'd probably do with a look. I think it's charming, and I think it's quite fun, and I think Richfield does it well. Now here's Stuart Fell playing Joe Grant, wiggling. And yeah, looking downwards a little too often, but that's always the there's an anecdote, isn't there, about Stuart wiggling in a feminine way to be Joe Grant. He abseils, I think they abseil, don't they, down a cliff later as well. But yeah, the darkness here and I think that now the music we will probably talk about a lot, but this is great, isn't it? Again, just the shot of the hand, and there's something about the fact that it's wet and you see that water dripping down. I think that's great. I think that's super. It's really creepy. Economical is a word I will use a lot, but it really is. There's so much that's happened in this episode. Considering where we started with the destruction of that boat, we've been to see the master, and we've had quite a sort of, you know, a charming series of exchanges between the Doctor and we get the stuff about the capital punishment, which is very, very interesting. The Doctor advocating for the master's life, which you know, when you think about it, I mean, I'm against the death penalty myself, but I have to accept that the Doctor's squeamishness about it has led to the deaths of many, many other people. And now the boat's gone, and that was the end of the trailer, I think, when they come and look out of the window. And that's a clever design and directorial choice, that we can see the exterior of the window to give us a connection with what's going on outside. And there's the close-up of the Sea Devil. It's a fantastic design, and I think the string vest is a good augmentation. The legend goes that Michael Bryant, the director, saw the design and went, well, I'm not having naked monsters, so costume designer Maggie Fletcher had to hurriedly assemble something, and she thought, well, maybe they dressed themselves with, you know, nets found at the bottom of the sea or whatever. It's a reasonable decision to have made, and I think it works. I think it looks excellent. So we've had the close-up that you think was going to be the cliffhanger, and then you have this really interesting kind of cheat, and I mean, you can hear that it's Declan Mulholland breathing, but I think only that's because I've seen it a gazillion times. I think it's whatever it is, but even if as a kid you work it out, you go, no, it's the other guy. That's part of the fun, because there's nothing like being a kid and going, oh no, I know what that is. So it's an unusual cliffhanger, but I think the way that it's shot with the shadow and the light and all of that really, really works. Really works. Declan Mulholland and Hugh Futcher get a credit on the same slide, and they are both wonderful character actors. And Brian Justice, who played the guard that was being failed to be hypnotised, is also, he must have excelled in guarddom, because he's Captain Yates's guard in the famously grammatically mangled credit Yates Guard in The Green Death, also directed by Michael E. Bryant. So Mike Bryant liked to use the same people. Sound and lighting, Mike Jeffries died a couple of years ago, actually, and Tony Millier, who I've interviewed, both I think excel. And Tony Snowden, the designer, he also did Vengeance on Varos. He died relatively recently too. What a shame. I think that triumvirate done fantastic work. So that is the end of episode 1 of The Sea Devils, which I think is a terrific instalment of Doctor Who. They cover so much ground. It has moments of charm. It's got a wonderful, you know, sort of new location, the seaside, the naval base, all of that. You know, Michael Bryant makes great use of this particular setting, which, you know, makes a break from either the grounds of Unit HQ or, as we've just seen in the season, the entirely studio bound Curse of Peladon. So it's a great new setting for the viewer at the time. all that stuff with the Master and the Doctor and Joe is lovely. The stuff with the Master and Trenchard is great, and that's set up a really interesting dynamic that's taking the story of, what's happening with these missing boats and these, only slightly glimpsed sea beasts. And some lovely directorial touches, some fun bits of character work, and it's visually interesting with the the way it's shot, but also all the guards have moustaches. The castle cars are Citroens with the doors taken off. We'll get into that in another episode, I'm sure. So what does Steve Hatcher think I am going to choose? Of course I am. I'm going to choose the Master watching the Clangers, Trenchard's reaction to that, and the Master's reaction to Trenchard's reaction. I think that is so charming, so witty, so beautifully acted. Doesn't really need to be there, and yet it would be a lesser episode without it. I love it to pieces. And I could have chosen all sorts of other things. I could have chosen that wonderful clanging, echoey sound design in the sea fort. I could have chosen just the glimpses of the monster. I could have chosen that opening scene, which I think is terrific. I love the fact that Captain Hart's coming on, pulling on his coat because he's been in bed, that suggests that it's nighttime. It just, again, makes it slightly real. All full of wonderful little touches. And it's exciting and it's interesting. And Malcolm Hulke is a very human writer. So I believe all of the people. But it's got to be the Clangers. Don't drop this one, Steve.
I'll start with episode 1. And for episode 1, what I've picked up on is the setting of No Man's Land Fort. What a superb location that is. It's a early 19th century, mid 19th century sea fort in the Solent off Portsmouth. And what a wonderful location for a Doctor Who story. I love that idea of the isolated artificial island. It's something that during normal times I see every summer, because we tend to go on the ferry from Portsmouth out towards France, and I always look out for the sea forts, in particular No Man's Land Fort. It's there just as you're leaving Portsmouth Harbour. And I always look out for sea devils, but I've never seen any yet. As we speak, I believe, the forties and the other forts in that little group are on sale. So if anybody is a multi-millionaire and fancies spending a bit of their money on a brilliant Doctor Who location, then No Man's Land Fort in the Solent, go for it. And that's my thing for episode 1.
Ah, well, it is, and it is a great location. It wasn't even one of the things that I mentioned, but geography and buildings are not my strong point, so they're not what I gravitate towards, which is a failing of mine. But I still, even though I love it, and it is an excellent location, and it looks fantastic on camera, and it allows for all sorts of dramatic potential, as we'll see, and again, this has this story. Considering much of the unit era is quite similar looking, it gives it its own visual flavour, which I like. I was never going to not choose the Clangers. I wonder if Steve might choose that as his bonus thing. But I'm an unapologetic Clangers lover in this. Give me the Clangers over the locations anytime. Give me whistling over geography anytime. Give me blue string soup over bricks and mortar any time, and map references. But I loved watching that for pleasure the other day. I loved watching that for scrutiny today. I hope you enjoyed being with me to get a glimpse of the Sea Devils. We'll see more of them in all their glory in the subsequent episodes. But thanks to Steve Hatcher, lovely, who, as I record this, has just hosted another Big Finish Day. I couldn't do it because I was doing I couldn't go. I mean, because I was doing another Nigel Neal centenary in London. But he organises brilliant events in Derby, and as I say, is a top fellow. So I'm very pleased to have him contributing to this, and I hope our differing perspectives bring you some enlightenment and or entertainment. Okay. That's the end of the first episode, so I'm going to wrap this audio up, put it in a bottle, and throw it out there and see if you like it when it washes up. Thanks very much. Ta-ta. Thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest this time around is Steve Hatcher. He can be found on Twitter at Stephen with a PH _Hatcher. Stephen _Hatcher. And what a lovely fellow he is. Thanks to him and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible and keep them ad-free. And they include Brian Sinclair, Paul Gibbons, Pete Lack, Andy John, Paul Hayes, Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Richard Straw, Nick Tedston, David, Jenny at Blue Box 99, Paul Carrington, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Crocker, Rob Dawson, and John Deere. The music is by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to become a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You get advance releases, you get bonus material, and you get various other little bits of interaction, including monthly Ask Me Anythings and photos of my dog, which may not sound like it, but they're amongst the most popular things I do, and I only did them because there was nothing out on a Tuesday. Anyway, I know times are tough. So if you can't submit yourself to a monthly model, you could, if you were feeling flush at any point and particularly enjoyed a particular episode of this, you could go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke and do a one-off payment of any amount that you like. The patrons, you can also get 10% off if you sign up for a year. So thank you. Of course, financial aid is not always possible, and I know times are really, really tricky, but what costs you nothing is to go to iTunes and to give these 5 stars. That would be really helpful. Really helps to separate these from the crowd, and a couple of lines of review as well. Gives something for passers-by to read, to give them an angle on what they might like about this. And also, what I really urge you to do, if you're a listener in the United States of America or Australia or Canada, I need more listeners there. I don't have enough. So tell your friends. They might like it. I normally plug Excess Malarkey at this point, but live comedy is in a parlour state, so I don't know if it's going to be here in 6 months' time. I do hope so. We're 25 years old. It's my comedy club. 25 years old in September 2022. And I've been doing it for more than half of my life. What I've been doing today is cursing the world because I was talking to my mum on the phone. I thought I'll multitask. I'll do the washing up whilst I talk to my mum on the phone. And suddenly she and my phone disappeared under the water. And so, of course, I immediately did what you're supposed to do, which put it in some rice. And then I looked online. It said, oh, no, turn it off. You'd want to turn it off. And you definitely don't turn it back on. So I turned it off. So I was doing the right thing. And then I looked on another website and it said, oh, yeah, but after you've turned it off, before you put it in the rice, just make sure you bat it out, and you bat it so that any moisture falls out of any crevices. And I thought, well, I haven't done that. Put it in the rice. I did sort of dry it, but yeah, let's bat it to do the crevices. So I took it out and I sort of batted it, and in so doing, I just caught the on button. Normally it takes me bloody ages. I have to press really hard to turn it on. It turned the bloody thing on. So I'm hoping that hasn't destroyed my phone. I've got 48 hours of it in a bag of rice, and because it said, oh no, you definitely don't turn it on because that'll short. So I didn't turn it on, but it did get turned on, and I was involved. So I suppose I did turn it on, but I'm sort of telling the fates it wasn't my fault. I was doing the thing it said on. I wasn't trying to turn it on. Anyway, it's amazing how mentally fraught you get. So attached to this, I've got a backup, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here on my computer. I can get messages on this, and I'm not incommunicado. But by God, it's like it's another limb. It's like somebody's chopped a limb off. This is a horrid. You'd think I'd learn, but this has happened before. And what it means is I have a really stressful couple of days. I then see if the phone still works. It didn't last time. It's not the first time it's fallen into water. The last time it was because I had it out in a kitchen, a mobile kitchen, and we were using it as the disco. You know, it got the music on it, and it was playing the music, and throughout the night it sort of vibrated, and so moved to the edge. It was in a cup because that makes it echo a bit more. It makes it like speakers, and it gradually got to that, and then just sort of fell out and landed below it into a pint or into a sink or something. It did a manoeuvre that would have, in many other circumstances, not been possible to do. And but that one I did turn off and on in order to, impatiently see if it still worked or not. But yeah, anyway, so I don't know why I'm telling you that. It's because you're my confessional, dear post-credit listener to this blatherer tour. So I've had a really annoying day, and I'll better stop because actually my next podcast is due out for patrons right now. I normally release them at midnight, and I haven't quite finished the edit of the latest edition of Indefinable Magic, which got a few technical glitches in, so I've had to re-record some sentences. So I better go and do that, so that release is going to be a little late, but it is a bank holiday Monday, so I'll forgive myself. Anyway, I hope you're all well with your working phones.